Good morning. We're ready to go. We've solved all our major technology issues, and welcome to the 34th Annual Common Ground Country Fair. I don't know how many of you were here yesterday, but you were joined by 27,000 others if you were, so that's an all-time record for here at Common Ground. And I think more people would be good today because body heat is an important thing. So let's bring them on in, crowd in here, and join me because today we have the pleasure of hearing from Jim Gerritsen, Prairie Farm. I'll do the promo for him. If you bought organic seed potatoes in Maine for anytime in the last 20 years, you've run into one of Jim's bags somewhere along the way. Because a long time ago he kind of figured out that this would be a good thing for somebody to do. And how do you do this? Well, you just keep plugging away and learning and figuring out and keeping notebooks and oh, by the way, you dive in and you help mock the certification program and you help national certification programs and you talk about what's so important about growing organically, and you join the board of the Organic Seed Alliance, and yeah, you can keep this business going in a little town in northern Maine. Actually, you're across the border, aren't you, Jim? You're in the T6R10, I think it is, one of those TR combos, because you have to cross the road into the woods to get to the farm. And it's always a great pleasure for me to go up and visit with Jim and Megan and their family and see what you can do when you really put your minds to it for a long time. So welcome to today's keynote speaker, Jim Gerritsen.
Okay, I'm more farmer than speaker, and last night we were putting potatoes away in the storage until 8:30 last night. Got up at 5. Actually, Megan got up at 4 this morning to milk the cow. I got up at 5 and we came down this morning. It was raining when we left, and I guess this time around,
just a little closer, Joe.
This time around we had the worst weather than you did.
Rick, maybe?
Is that working out?
Ernie?
He's right there.
Can you hear me? Okay. Can anybody hear me yet?
Time out, exercises, you stretch a little bit, get the blood moving.
Check. Okay, now it's working? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm here to tell you today that organic is here, it's growing, it's strong, it's permanent, and it is going to be the wave of the future. The perspective that I'm going to give you is from being a farmer in northern Maine in Aroostook County. We've been farming organically for 34 years. Long before it was any advantage in the marketplace, I can tell you that. This end of Maine has particular importance and significance to us. This fair has significance to us. I'm not sure if I went to the first one, which I think was 77, but I was at the second one in 1978. Met Wendell Berry at one of those first fairs. We don't get down here too often. The last time we were down, Vandana Shiva was here, and I guess that was probably about 5 years ago. But the Common Ground Fair, I think, is a wonderful symbol of the value of community that organic has developed here in Maine. And even when we don't get here, it's still, Common Ground Fair always comes in the middle of potato harvest in Aroostook County, and getting away on a day that's dry enough to dig is a hard deal. So we don't often make it, but it is part of my calibration. We're always very conscious of the weekend, very conscious of what weather is going on, so the folks coming here can enjoy. And even when we don't make it, it's always in our thought. In many ways, I'm kind of the figurehead of our farm, Wood Prairie Farm, but that's really not appropriate. The reality is we have a family farm, and it's very much a collaboration and a joint effort between all of the members of my family. Sitting over there, Megan, my wife, Caleb, our second oldest son, and our two daughters, Sarah and Amy. And we work hard. That's the life of farming. It's a great life, second to none. But when I'm up here talking, it's usually because I'm not getting stuff done home and there's others that are filling in. So in every sense of the word, this is a collaboration, and farming in this era is absolutely a family affair, and everybody on the family is really important. My background was that I didn't grow up on a farm. I find it interesting that both of my parents were of the generation that grew up on farms, and then they were part of that societal thought that there was a better life to be found off of the farm. My dad was born in 1912, and he was raised on an apple farm in Yakima, Washington. My mother was born in 1923, and she was raised on a cattle and wheat farm in South Dakota. I was raised in San Francisco, and I was a real fish out of the water. I never fit in to that urban upbringing. From the time I was 4 or 5 years old, and I'm 55 now, so that would have been about 1960, we'd go camping. And at that point, camping was really what I could relate to, being outdoors, where nature is in charge. But as a kid growing up in the city, I never fit in. Well, I went up, upon graduating high school, went up to Humboldt State University and started out as a forestry major, and pretty quick determined that I neither wanted to work for the U.S. government or for a big paper company, which were the options for foresters, and came to realize in working on some local farms in that area that farming was really my calling. And I think anybody with gumption that's working for another farmer pretty quick develops a plan of wanting to have a farm of their own, and that was the case with me. So I continued to work, save money, research different areas of the country, and decided that after elimination that Maine was the right place to head, and specifically northern Maine. And the geology of northern Maine is particularly suited to farming. The soils are very high quality. And coming from a California background 35 years ago, I didn't want to get crowded out, and I looked at the California experience and decided, well, what makes California tick? And it's that nice sunny weather. So I looked at the other end of the spectrum and decided northern Maine would be a place that wouldn't get overly crowded. 35 years later, so far I'm right. Back then in the mid-70s, I don't think any of us realized it at the time, but land was really a bargain. I bought my first 40 acres in 1976 for $150 an acre, which seems like an incredible deal, except a friend of mine, Jeff Cayley, 4 years before that, he bought a 120-acre farm for $6,000. That would be $50 an acre. It had the deeper caribou loam and a woodlot that hadn't been touched in 35 or 40 years. But very quickly the price of land started to appreciate, though I think it's still the bargain in the state of Maine. But Aroostook County is a wonderful place. it has a lot in common, I think, with kind of Alaska, in that there's kind of a pioneering spirit. We're one of the few counties in the United States where we continue to lose population with every census, but I think the people that are able to stick it out up there love it, and if you can figure out a way to make a living, it's a wonderful place to live. If any of you are looking for land, I'd certainly recommend checking out Aroostook County, because I think there still is affordability, whereas at other corners of Maine and New England, the land prices are becoming high enough that I think alternatives like land trusts and community ownership of land maybe are options that have to be explored. But Aroostook County still has good farmland that can be accessed, and it may be a future for you. After buying the initial 40 acres, a few years later, I bought another 40 acres, and then Megan came along, and we just this summer celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary. Shortly after that, we bought another 20 acres, and then after that, another 10 acres, and now we rent another 5.5 acres from our neighbors. So we're farming about 115 acres. Well, I say that, but half of it is woodlot. And we've cleared the trees off of about 35 acres of that. You know, that's typically what is going on with abandoned farms in Maine, is that nature is trying to reclaim them. The land up our way was originally forest, and nature would just as soon take that back if energy is not put into it. The first fall I was up, the fall of '76, I worked for Eldon Bradbury Brothers in Bridgewater. At that time, they were probably the largest potato farmer in town. They had 300 acres in. They had 3 harvesters, conventional harvesters. I worked on the harvester. We worked 6 days a week from 6 a.m. until 6 p.m. We got an hour off for dinner, and I think maybe on Saturday afternoon we got done at 4 o'clock. We got paychecks Saturday night. Everybody in town on our crew, and we had probably, there were 6 on our harvester, and there were 3 harvesters, and there were they probably had 6 trucks, each with a truck driver. In the potato storage, they probably had 4 people working. So on that one family farm, again, the larger one in town, there were probably 30 to 40 workers, and that was one farm out of about 30 farms in our town. But every one of those workers, myself included, went to Clowwater's store that evening and got our check cashed. I think it was $2.75 an hour was the hourly rate that fall. But I added up in my head, you know, because all the crews in town, they'd go to Clowwater's, and he had to have like $100,000 in cash in 1976 dollars. But those were days where there was, you know, back then between 1,000 and 1,500 potato farmers. Multiply that times anywhere between 20 and 30, maybe 40 people per crew, and you could see how big a significant part this was of the culture of Aroostook County. What I want to do right now is read an address that I gave at the Slow Food Terra Madre meeting 4 years ago. The title of that address was The Potato Culture of Aroostook County, and Megan, my wife, and I worked a year in putting this together, and we were limited to 10 minutes, so we've never in our lives done as careful a job of making sure every word in there had meaning, because you can't say much in 10 minutes. And I think the best way for me to convey what Aroostook County and our life is like is to convey that, and then we'll go on. So this will take about 10 minutes. And I think it'll kind of give you an overview to what I'm going to be talking about with the rest of my comments. The potato culture of Aroostook County, Maine, USA. And maybe you're not familiar with this, but Slow Food is an organization that originated in Italy probably by now 25 years ago. Started up as an alternative to the concept of fast food, and I think McDonald's wanted to put in a restaurant in Italy, and the Italians, food is a real big part of their culture. They came up with this organization. It's gone, in the intervening years, it's gone national. And beginning 6 years ago, they had a meeting in Turin, Italy called Terra Madre, where they bring together 5,000 food producers and farmers from around the world, and it's a very powerful event. There's going to be one here next month in Turin, and there are delegates going here from Maine again. Megan and I went to the first one 6 years ago, and then 4 years ago, my son, then 16-year-old, he and I attended, and this is the point at which I gave this address. Good morning. I'm Jim Gerritsen. We have a family farm and raise organic certified seed potatoes in the state of Maine in the United States. I'd like to thank the folks at Slow Food and our hosts here in Italy for the opportunity that they have created in bringing together this wonderful group of farmers and producers. Our Wood Prairie Farm is located in Aroostook County, the northernmost county in the state of Maine. Maine's biggest farm crops are potatoes, followed by milk, eggs, and blueberries. At 5%, Maine has the second highest ratio of organic farms to conventional farms in the United States. The land that is now Aroostook County was uninhabited forest for thousands of years. Aroostook County's history has been heavily influenced by two factors: potatoes and its isolation from the populated southern New England by forested wilderness. In the early 1800s, the first white settlers to Aroostook County started carving fields out of the forest and immediately began planting potatoes. What they found was that unlike the marginal soils covering most of New England, the geologically distinct, well-drained, fertile loam soils of Aroostook, along with the cool northern climate, were perfect for growing potatoes. Over the next 100 years, farmers made steady and massive efforts to clear the trees from hundreds of thousands of acres in order to grow potatoes. The big revolution occurred in the late 1800s when the railroad came into Aroostook County. With good soil, climate, transportation, 40 inches of annual precipitation, and relative proximity to East Coast population centers, Maine's potato empire was born in Aroostook County. Through the early 1950s, the annual crop of almost 250,000 acres of potatoes made Maine the leader in the United States potato production. In the last 50 years, Maine's potato empire has seriously waned. Among the factors, shifting consumer preferences away from fresh potatoes and home-cooked meals to factory-processed foods such as frozen French fries and potato chips. Successful marketing, standardized marketing campaigns that convinced recent generations of American consumers that an Idaho russet was the only potato worth eating. Competition from potato producers in the American West who benefit from federally subsidized irrigation and hydroelectric projects. The transformation of traditional potato farming to a generic farm-produced commodity with a capital-intensive, highly mechanized, increasingly concentrated system of large-scale, factory-like production. And finally, decade after decade of low farm gate prices. While Aroostook County still produces more potatoes than any other county in the United States, our production is now a quarter of what it was at its peak. Despite this steady decline, Aroostook County still has a potato-based culture, much as it has had for the last 150 years. Going back many generations, everyone in Aroostook has worked in the fields picking potatoes. Many former farmers and non-farmers schedule vacation time so that they can help family members harvest their potato crop. We are one of the last areas in the United States where schools are still closed for harvest break so that the kids can help farmers get their crop in. Often the teenagers that we hire are taught potato picking techniques by their parents and by their grandparents, who they themselves had learned picking when they were kids. In our potato culture, there is a universal belief that hard work and thrift are best learned at an early age and in a potato field. This is an endangered tradition as increased potato mechanization reduces opportunities for both handwork and for teenage workers. Now a little bit about Wood Prairie Farm. We've been farming organically for over 30 years. We own 110 acres. Like most Maine farms, half of our acreage is in forest. We farm 55 acres, including 48 acres in rotated crop production. We have a 4-year rotation. Year 1, potatoes. Year 2, spring wheat or oats underplanted with clover and timothy grass. The clover sod from year 3 is plowed under after planting is done in year 4, and the field is then planted to a plow-down crop of buckwheat, followed by a plow-down crop of dwarf Essex rapeseed as a biofumigant. Year 5, we go back to potatoes. This is a modified rotation of the traditional Aroostook County potato rotation. Our rotation allows us 10 to 12 acres of potatoes a year. We also grow lesser amounts of other root crops like carrots, beets, parsnips, and onions. We plant in May, harvest by early October, and we ship from underground storage until June. We sell seed potatoes certified as seed by the state of Maine to home and market gardeners across the United States through a mail order catalog and a website operation. We also wholesale to mail order seed houses who sell our organic seed potatoes in their catalogs. In my remaining minutes, I'd like to talk about the question of scale in agriculture. Within the Maine organic community, our 10 acres of potato production would be considered average. However, it is very small compared to the 200 to 700, even 2,500 acre potato crops of our non-organic neighbors. Yet the size of the thousands of farms back in Aroostook's golden age were also small by comparison to today. Clearly, as the average farm size increases, there is an even greater decrease in the number of farmers remaining. 50 years ago, our 4-mile-long stretch of road had 30 potato farms. 20 years later, our entire town was down to 30 potato farms. Today, there are just 6 potato farmers left in town. One economist has projected that if current trends continue, Maine's 60,000 acres of potatoes will one day be grown by just 20 farmers, each growing 3,000 acres. This upward trend in scale is similar across American agriculture. 2 factors contributing to this trend are the short-sighted acceptance of genetically modified GMO crops by American farmers and the unrelenting rise of corporate consolidation and domination, first within the U.S. economy and now within the national government. And keep in mind, this was a speech from 4 years ago. Historically, it is worth noting that subsequent to the populist movement of the late 1800s, the American farm economist Carl Wilkin in the 1930s concluded, through his work developing the economic model known as farm parity, that restrictions upon the size of large farms was necessary in order to ensure the proper functioning of the economy, economic justice for farmers, and broad benefits to the whole of society. 30 years ago, American writer and farmer Wendell Berry published his landmark work, The Unsettling of America, which expressed serious reservations to this then unquestioned trend within American agriculture of hypergrowth, mechanization, and consolidation. The harvest we are now reaping from this modern scale is liquidated family farmers, crushed rural communities, an unstable food supply, and an at-risk democracy. Since its inception, the organic community has been a safe harbor for the American family farmer. However, corporate entry into organic production and marketing is now occurring at a rapid rate, and its influence is being felt nationwide. Go into an American chain grocery store today, and you will find corporate organic vegetables which have been shipped in from thousands of miles away with no local products to be seen. This development is harmful to family-scale agriculture because of loss of market opportunity and downward price pressure. Will organic farmers succumb to the same forces of scale, consolidation, and control that have led to the demise of other family operations? Three reasons come to mind that make me optimistic. First is the spirit embodied in the slow food dialogue of honoring the producer and valuing food that is good, clean, and fair. Second is the developing concept of an organic family farmer certification system that identifies organic family farmers in the marketplace, aiding co-producers seeking authentic goods and protecting real family farmers from corporate imitators. And third is the dawning on Americans that local is in fact better, as reflected in the growth of CSAs, community-supported agriculture, and farmers markets. Finally, on behalf of the organic farm community in the United States, I would like to thank the world's organic and farm communities for your courage, leadership, and persistence in fighting the spread of GMOs. Your work provides monumental inspiration and assistance to those of us on the inside of the problem who are also working to stop biotech tyranny and their crimes against nature. Thank you. During the first Terra Madre meeting, just to offer one little anecdote of the value of the coming together, we were able to speak with and interview for our Prairie Farm newsletter basically, I guess you'd call him a subsistence potato farmer from the Bolivian Andes. And this gentleman had never, prior to coming to Turin, Italy, he had never been outside more than 4 miles away from the home that he was born in, had never been outside of his village. And if you can imagine, you know, the change of going from that mountain village in Bolivia to Turin, Italy, and then being surrounded by 5,000 farmers that are all hanging on by their fingertips in a world which is constantly telling us that we are need to get out of the way, we need to let the corporations take over because they're more efficient at it, and decide they know what the consumers want, when the reality is, in Bolivia, in Maine, in the United States, in any country you pick, that the success of the slow food movement is because the family farmers are holding on to the heirloom varieties that taste good, that produce under difficult local climatic conditions, and that is the food that people want to eat. The food that the corporations are shoving down the throat, the use of our government to force GMO grain to foreign countries that don't want it, that is not democracy. That is not what we're after. And the reality is that family scale agriculture is there's an undercurrent. It is thriving. It is not getting the attention of the media. And this, again, going back 4 and 6 years ago, I think a lot of change is coming in the last 4 to 6 years. The media is picking up on this. Now, farming has become one of the honorable professions. For years, many of us that were farmers, I thought it was, but I guess the media didn't. But I think that the family scale farmers are doing what the world's people want. We have the real varieties of vegetables and fruits and grains and livestock that have a culture attached to them and a history attached to them, and compared to the generic commodities that industrial agriculture has basically, through the acquiescence of the government, has created the marketplace. I think we're where it's at, and I think this Common Ground Fair is a reflection of this developing undercurrent that is going to become the wave of the future. Back last summer, we try to take a few farmer vacations, which if you don't farm, that means get about 2 or 3 days off. So we went down to Megan's aunt has a camp at Hancock Pond in North New Portland. And on her book, she volunteers at the library, and the library has sales events to raise money in the fall. And here on her shelf was a 25-year-old book, unread, called The Simple Life. So I grabbed that, and the idea of simplicity has been something I've been fascinated by for over 35 years. The fact that this was written in the mid-1980s, it was still as fresh, the concept in it, as had it been written yesterday. But the gist of it, this book, which I would highly recommend if you've never heard of it, and I never had, but it basically is following the history of the concept of simplicity as compared to complexity. Primarily material simplicity, which the author relates to a spirituality. It's kind of an ebb and flow. The more simple, the more spiritual, the more complex, the less spiritual. And he goes back to colonial times and shows a very interesting thread of the survival of this concept of simplicity. Like, for example, during the American Revolution, there was it became a patriotic fervor to be simple because the luxury goods were imported from England, and that if you were going for luxury goods, it means that you were really supporting the enemy. So there was a real big tide of interest in that. Typically what would happen is the thing would get co-opted, and then the simplicity would just about die out, and maybe within 30 or 40 years it would be a resurgence. And typically in times of economic stress, say the 1890s, the 1930s, you would see this resurgence of the idea of simplicity, getting back to basic values, doing more for yourself and your community. And I think that the organic community has really been, we've never let that thing go away. The concept of simplicity, and I know within some of our subculture the idea of spirituality is not a popular phrase, but I think really, if you step back, that a lot of the values that we have within this organic community really are spiritually based values. I heard on NPR in the last couple of weeks a professor that had completed a study about how come rich people are always so unhappy. And, come to find out, they think happiness is going to be gained by buying things. And when in fact her research indicated that experiential devotion is what makes you happy. So it's say going on a vacation, going to a camp in Maine, enjoying your family, enjoying nature. That's what the rich ought to be doing with their money, but they go out and buy boats and this and that don't add to the real sense. So I think those of us in the organic community have already got that figured out. It's just part of our way of looking at life, is that the essence, the real value of life comes from what we're doing, the people that we're interacting with, our family, and it doesn't come from the accumulation of goods. But this concept of simplicity got me to thinking about it in terms of coming here to speak today. I think one of the important things, and up our way, we have two Amish communities, one in Smyrna and a relatively new one up in Easton. And we've got a Mennonite community right in our town of Bridgewater. I find it kind of interesting that we were looked upon as kind of a mission activity for the Mennonites in the prairie states. I guess we needed some help, and they've turned out to be really good neighbors. We've got differences in their theology, both the Mennonites and the Baptists, or the Amish. That was a Freudian slip there. But the fact is, what I think is so appealing about their culture is the subordination of the individual and the raising up of the value of community. And I think the striving for community is something that the organic community probably doesn't step out and view itself, but I think we've done actually a pretty good job. But I think it's a major element that has made us strong and has been the underpinnings for the, for this transformation from a chemical-intensive agriculture, and we are now in the second stage where the organic principles are starting to be adopted and incorporated into conventional agriculture. Of course, they're not calling it organic, but they say that there are 3 stages of historical change. The first is a total rejection of the new idea. That stage has, I think we're on the tail end of that. We're now into the second stage, which is the incorporation of the new concept into the status quo. And then the third stage, you'll know you get there when they say, well, this is the way we've always done it. So we're not there yet, but we're getting there. So within, I think the true definition of community is the extension of values that we lay upon our family, and we extend that to our neighbors and to the people around us. And I believe that this organic community in Maine is extraordinary and a real standard bearer of the organic community throughout the United States. And I increasingly hear the term organic industry come in. And to those of us who have been in this for a long time, I think we still consider this an organic community. And the money folks that come in because there's money to be made here, is their soil going to be good 3 years after a 36-month withdrawal from chemicals? Do you really think that the produce coming off in that 37th month is going to be as good as land that has been treated organically for 30 or 35 years? Well, no, I don't either. But the room is big and there's many doors and we need to let them all in. But I think the essence, the real important thing in organic is the organic community. And I think there are lessons that we can learn from our Amish and Mennonite friends. I think they've done a better job at seeing that there's value to be gained when you put into something greater than yourself. You contribute to the community good for the rising of the community good, rather than the Dick Cheney get the hell out of my way attitude. It's more the Dalai Lama approach than the Dick Cheney approach, and I think the organic community here in Maine does a great job. We can do better. We always need to do better, but we do a great job, and this Common Ground Fair ought to be a celebration of that attitude. Now here's a proposition I'm going to put out. My feeling, I believe that organic farming is the superior system in terms of deliverables. The food, it's higher quality. If it's done right, it's nutrient dense and it's good tasting. From a resource standpoint, we are successful in nutrient cycling. We have an avoidance of placing chemicals into the environment. And from a standpoint of the societal perspective, we can strengthen democracy and justice by having a strong network of family farmers producing food for people in our region. So in that way, organic does best, and I'm going to get into some of the details of why I think that is so, and then for those of you interested in it, of trying to get into farming, some things that we've picked up over the years that might be helpful in getting a start. In terms of nutrient density, I'm reminded of a friend of mine who was one of the pioneers of potatoes in Aroostook County. His name is Chris Holmes, and he's up in Presque Isle. And this was back in the early 1980s when the organic market had really not developed well, and Chris had been experimenting and growing some potatoes and really had them harvested and had no real home for them. So he ended up taking them up to the French fry factory in Presque Isle. It was the potato service company at that time. And when the loads come in, he had a bulk barrel truck, 80 or 100 barrels, 8-ton or thereabouts on board. And as the truck would come into the factory, they'd stop and they'd weigh the truck, and so they could figure out how many pounds of potatoes were on. And then they would take a specific gravity reading. So Chris was quite a character. He is quite a character. And he didn't say a word. And the guy did the sampling of the potatoes, and he shook his head, and he got another sample of potatoes, and he shook his head, and he finally came up to Chris and he said, well, jeepers, I guess we're going to have to test this later because my instrument seems to be broken. It was registering off the chart for specific gravity, and specific gravity is the, if you think back to your chemistry class in high school, the standard is water. That's a rating of 1, and everything can be compared in terms of specific gravity, the density that it has, mass to weight, as compared to water. And a wet potato, a low gravity potato, is going to have more water in it and hence less solids. And a high gravity potato, a dry, mealy potato, say like a russet Burbank that Idaho made its fame on, that would be a high gravity potato, high solids, and low moisture. Well, there are other ways of lowering the gravity content. If you have excessive irrigation, excessive fertility, you can create a very watery potato. And I was witness to a conversation of an Aroostook potato farmer. This is probably 8 or 10 years ago. He was a process grower and sells his potatoes to McCain's. And he was bragging that he put 1,000 pounds of potatoes in the fall, and then because he had extremely high humidity in that storage, it would be like a London fog, he'd be able to ship out 1,050 pounds of potatoes. So he was quite proud of the fact that he was getting an extra 50 pounds of potatoes out of that. And, you know, I'd prefer to just drink my water in a glass rather than in a French fry. But the bottom line is, you know, I see we've got good people there at the university, good people. Wayne Honeycutt is the head of the USDA ARS lab up at Orono, and he and his scientists are doing really good research up there. They don't call it organic because they know that's going to bring some thunder down upon them, but it's good science that benefits all farmers, not only organic farmers. But when they go and do their yield trials, they compare pounds to pounds. Well, you know, if you got a truckload of watery potatoes and then you got a truckload of dense organic potatoes, you're getting a lot more nutrition out of a 100-pound bag of organic potatoes. So I don't think it's fair to just compare it pound to pound or 100 weight to 100 weight. And I use that example of Chris Holmes as an example. They were so unused to seeing a nutrient-dense, high-gravity potato, and these were Kennebecks that he had grown, that they just couldn't understand it, and Chris wasn't about to tell them why it was. So, I guess one of my beliefs is that all of us need to do our homework on many different levels. But one of the things, we've got to educate ourselves. You know, the media has evolved to this 15-second explanation. If you can't explain your issue in 10 to 15 seconds, you know, forget it. It just isn't going to go over the head of people. And the reality is we've got to be doing our homework, and the good thing is that we have some really talented people out there that can conceptualize and write into books these things that we need to study and to gain an understanding. That the issue of GMOs is a complicated issue, but if we close our eyes to it and let the government take over, we see what a mess that's happened in the last 25 years. The revolving door between industry and the government, the good old boys club, and they end up making the decisions for us. So in order to gain hold and really of our food policy and to make sure that our families and our communities have access to good food, we've got to be educated, and that means doing your homework. And some of the authors you already know, Wendell Berry, Michael Pollock, those folks, you know, Wendell Berry, for 30 to 40 years he's been grappling with these issues, and he continues. I got a book for Christmas that I'm maybe halfway through now reading, but you know, he is right on target with some of the issues, and you need to read his books. I enjoy his nonfiction best, because when I have time to read, I need a little bit of a relief. So I like his nonfiction, excuse me, his fiction best, but his nonfiction is where you can do your homework and gain an understanding. Lisa Hamilton is a young writer. How many of you have read the book Deeply Rooted? Gene, I know you have. Anyway, in that book, she goes into depth telling the stories of 3 different farmers, and one would be a dairy farmer in Texas, another a beef farmer, 10th generation New Mexico beef farmer, and the third, near and dear to my heart, are the Podolls in North Dakota, who are organic seed growers that we know. We buy some of their seed, which we sell in our catalog, but they're a good family farm. In fact, the story is that David Podol, back in the 1970s, grew up as a conventional farmer, and he went to study organic farming simply so he could prove how wrong it was. Come to find out, organic farming was the superior system. So back then in North Dakota, you didn't admit to your neighbors that you were an organic farmer. And David's brother Dan was at college in North Dakota, and his future to-be wife Teresa attended a lecture at a college course, and the professor there had stuck his neck out, but he had an organic farm, and this is back in the 1980s, if you can believe that. But she was, this was her first introduction to the concept of organic farming, and she was so excited that she ran across campus to tell her her boyfriend Dan about this concept of organic farming. And they had been going out, I think, for 6 months by that time. And Dan had to admit that yes, he was an organic farmer, and his brother was, and he had not for 6 months been able to tell Teresa that. She had grown up on a potato farm in the Red River Valley. But it took him, actually, who knows how long it would have taken, because the cat came out of the bag after 6 months. But I guess that maybe is a difference between Maine and North Dakota. Moving on the list, well, that's the book Deeply Rooted by Lisa Hamilton. Another book that you ought to read is Uncertain Peril, written by Claire Hope Cummings. She served on the board of directors with me on the Organic Seed Alliance, and it's a real good explanation of the problem with GMOs in food, and I hope everyone would read it. Fred Kirschman, another member of the Organic Seed Alliance Board of Directors, has just released a new book which I haven't had a chance to read, but Fred is a real gem. He's someone, he comes from a background of a large-scale organic farm in North Dakota. Everything they do in North Dakota is large-scale. And he's very eloquent in his writings that deliver the idea that organic farming can be done on a family scale and can be done well, and in fact the best food is going to be produced organically. And then finally, last but not least, is the Maine Organic Farmer and Gardener newspaper that Gene English is the editor of. Of the different publications that I get, I'm just amazed at the quality of that publication, which I think comes out 4 times a year. And I think Jean and her crew do a great job, and I think that's a real testimony to what's going on in Maine. So thank you, Jean. Now that's kind of talking about the generalities and the policy issues, but if you want to get down into farming, we've also got some good farmer writers here in New England. And one, of course, is Elliot Coleman. And I would recommend getting any of his books. The first one I'd probably read if I were interested in getting into farming would be The New Organic Grower. Elliot knows what he's talking about, and you're going to gain a lot. You know, you spend $30 on a book and you're going to come away with a dozen new ideas. So there's a second book, I think it came out last fall, by Richard Wiswall in Vermont, called something to the effect the Organic Farmer's Business Handbook. And Richard is a market grower in Vermont, and he's always been a good hand, had a good business mind. And if you're going to farm and make a living out of it, you've got to run it as a business. And if you come at it without a business background, you can educate yourself, and those are 2 good books. And then just as a hint, you know, after farming for 34 years, I can tell you this, you might just as well focus on your soil and your micronutrients now, because in the end, that's what's going to make you a better farmer. So you might as well focus on that at the outset. You're going to benefit. And If you're not aware, the Heart of Maine RC&D, every February they have a 2 or 3 day soil school in Bangor, and they brought in Arden Anderson, Neil Kinsey, some of these really cutting-edge teachers on soil nutrition. Gary Zimmer from Wisconsin has been brought in. These are people, the rate of going, $100, $125 for the 2 or 3 days. It's just something you can't afford to miss. And then Maine Organic Farmers also has this farmer-to-farmer conference held in Northport near Camden. The first Friday, Saturday, Sunday in November. It's been refined, and it's a very good design for allowing farmers to share their knowledge along with cooperative extension. It's growing in great numbers, and one of the things that particularly is pleasing to me is to see how many young people are in attendance at this. It's really an indication that agriculture in general is aging. The average age of farmers in Maine goes right off the charts. We have a lot of young people that are getting into farming, and I think that's the most optimistic thing that can be said about any agriculture, is that young people are getting involved. Now, all of us live busy lives, farmers and non-farmers alike. And I guess what I want to convey is this idea that we can multiply our effect by supporting our allies. There are individuals and there are groups out there that deserve your support, and that by giving your support, you can multiply the good that is done. And there are examples of this, like MOFGA is the first one that comes to mind. If you for a minute had an idea that this fair came together just kind of like magic, this is, I think, the 34th fair. MOFGA started, I think, 39 years ago from some idealists that decided that we needed to grab hold of the food system in Maine and make a change. And I think, the fact that among MOFGA members we have members in the legislature, we've had candidates for governor, Shelley Pingree, congresswoman from the 1st District. All these are members of the MOFGA community, and I think supporting MOFGA, if you are here at the fair and you are enjoying this, I really think that the right thing to do is to become a member of MOFGA so that you can add your support to the movement that is developing in Maine. And if you're a farmer that is farming organically, you ought to get certified by MOFGA. When Russell Libby goes to the legislature and gives testimony, it's one thing if he's there representing 400 certified farmers in Maine, but the rough rule of thumb is that maybe 1 out of 2 organic farmers in Maine has not yet become certified. If he could go to the legislature and represent, say, I speak in behalf of 800 certified organic farmers. There's only 8,000 farmers in the state of Maine, depending on how you define it. So if he can go claiming 10% of the farmers in Maine, that's a significant tool for him to get influence. And becoming a member of MOFGA, becoming a MOFGA certified farmer, those are all things that you can do that is going to add to your effect in bringing about the change that is very definitely needed within agriculture. There are a couple of grassroots groups here in the state of Maine that I think have merit and you should look into and consider joining or volunteering for, and that's Food for Maine's Future and Cultivating Community. On a larger scale, MOFGA does a wonderful job working on the issues here in Maine, but as we're learning with food safety, a lot of the decisions that are going to impact us here in Maine are taking place outside of Maine, and it's very important that we have representation for a progressive view of agriculture on a national level. And the wonderful development the last few years here in New England is that we have a charter chapter of the National Farmers Union called the New England Farmers Union. Annie Cheatham over here is the president. She has a booth in the demonstration tent, ag demonstration tent, and I would encourage you to come and learn about New England Farmers Union. I think you will be blown away by the policy book of the NFU, and we're now, I'm on the board of advisors for the NEFU, and we're now developing policy manual for the New England chapter, and the progressive nature of those policies are really remarkable. One of the exciting recent events is that a new board member has been brought on who's involved with the food co-ops in western New England. There's an association of food co-ops, 20 food co-ops that have a total of 80,000 members that have signed on as an affiliate member of New England Farmers Union. And I think the same strategy that MOFCA has used in not only having farmers and gardeners and consumers and interested citizens involved in food policy, bringing all different aspects of people into supporting the food movement. New England Farmers Union is using the same idea of bringing those people that eat food as well as those people that produce food. And New England Farmers Union definitely needs and deserves your help, and I hope that you come and over to the booth, and when I'm done here, that's where I'll be hanging out this afternoon. So if there's any questions that you have, Annie or I would be happy to answer them, and I hope you'd be able to look into that. And that kind of brings me up, this goes back to a concept that the Mennonites do, and I imagine the Amish do, and some of the other groups up our way, and that's this biblical concept of tithing. And I think the concept is that you basically give 10% of your earnings to the church. I think the right way to look about it is that if you take 10% of your energy and your earnings and put it towards a good greater than yourself, you know, if you earn $20,000 a year, 10% is going to be $2,000. Buy a CSA membership for $500. Become a member of MOFCA, become a member of NEFU, send a campaign contribution to Mike Michaud or to Shelley Pindry, who are doing a good job representing the state of Maine in a very hostile environment in Congress. Land for Maine's Future, join up with groups that are trying to change the status quo and create an opportunity so that young people who have the desire to farm but may not have the resources to buy a farm at the price that land is going for now can come up with imaginative ways of taking, passing farms from one generation down to the next. But if you can, here at this fair there are 1,000 to 1,500 people that are, instead of just enjoying the fair, they're donating their time to help make this fair a success. That kind of giving the community to making the community stronger by giving some of yourself, I think it's something that's innate to those of us in the organic community, and I think it is what our real strength is. I got into a discussion the other day about Monsanto with one of my friends, and he was, I guess it was yesterday, and we were on the phone, and he was relating that back in the early 90s, Monsanto was hoping that the organic community would wrap their arms around their GMO technology. I don't know where they were coming from, but that was the reality, and my friend thought that they were quite genuine with that interest, and I think maybe that genuine nature is ebbed out by now. But the fact is, Monsanto has gained their influence from apathy, from behind-the-scenes dealing, from giving research funding to land-grant university colleges so that they do research, and all of these land-grant university colleges are suffering from inadequate funding now, right down to the University of Maine. And when a chemical company or a biotech company comes up with $40,000, $60,000, $100,000 for doing research, they see it as, at best maybe a necessary evil, but they do take the money. And then, human nature is that you don't bite the hand that feeds you. The fact is, if we can use that tithing concept to fight the apathy to get out and vote this November, to vote for progressives that are going to continue on. And I'll just give you one example in terms of Monsanto. Over the 8 years of the Bush administration, the antitrust division must have gone fishing and went on holiday because they didn't do anything. And in that time, Monsanto bought up a large amount of the corn genetics in the Midwest. Family companies that had been in existence 40, 60, 80 years. They bought up all those genetics, and now they're stacking GMO traits. And the conventional farmers in the Midwest are starting to see that, you know, if they want soybeans, it basically is buying GMO soybeans. There are virtually no non-GMO soybean seed available. The same with corn, the similar thing with cotton. So in the 8 years that Monsanto did this without any type of restraint by the antitrust division at the Department of Justice, Monsanto now controls 80 to 90% of the seed for corn, soybeans, and cotton. And that kind of monopoly does not work in a democracy. With the Obama administration, as many of you may know, there is now hearings going on, joint hearings between the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Department of Justice on the concentration in agriculture. This would not have happened had Obama not been elected. So it's a real dogfight in Washington. There's a lot of things that need to be done, but because of the economic mess which was brought to us by 8 years of mismanagement, it's all they can do to prevent us from slipping into a depression. So the change is coming slow, but I submit to you that Obama and the new administration are doing the best they can under extremely trying circumstances, and that we will be fulfilling our opposition's greatest dreams if by apathy we're going to stay away from the voting booth this November. We need to support our allies, the ones that are in government, the ones that are in the university. They're out there, they're fighting for us. A lot of them have to keep low profiles because they see that the status quo is such that supporting organic is something you can't do in a public manner. You know, we're still in this transition, but they need your support, and I encourage you just to fight this idea of apathy. I think it's the one thing that could lead to a real disaster this November.
Jim?
Yeah. Russell tells me it's 5 minutes left, and I'm down to my last page notes. Okay, some nuts and bolts. This section I titled Organic Farming in a Dysfunctional Economy. We made the decision years ago that if we were to succeed at farming, we needed to mechanize on an appropriate scale. There are times when I wonder how smart an idea that was. It is absolutely stunning to me, the cost of repair parts. There is absolutely no relation to the cost of production. I imagine that everyone is putting their 300 or 400% markup on it, and you know, we've got a four-wheel drive forklift that we take pallet boxes in and out of the field with, and a kingpin went on that a few days ago, and the parts came in just for one half of one side, $650. And then that reminds me of a news story that was on NPR the other day, and it talked of a pill that was misused but popular back in the late 50s, early 60s. If you went to Brazil and you bought that pill today, you could get it for 7 cents. But did you catch how much it would cost to buy it in the United States? $160 for the same pill you could buy in Brazil for 7 cents. We have a dysfunctional breed-based economy, and to try to make a living farming within the context of that is a tough deal. So that's where I get back to this idea of tithing. What farmers need, and these young farmers that are starting out, I think the best thing, first off, in the state of Maine, people eat vegetables, and vegetables have a high gross income per acre. That would be the first thing I would look at getting into if I were interested in getting into farming. But as you start out, you probably want to start selling in a farmer's market where if you have a crop failure, it isn't that bad a thing, you just don't have it to sell. If you have a CSA, I look at having a community supported ag project as a second stage, that once you have a little bit of experience and can produce a steady crop reliably, then you can start to take on subscribers. Maybe subscribers can come from friends that you have at work or at your spouse's workplace, at church, at schools, if you're part of the PTCO, things like that can develop. And if all of us that don't have the opportunity to grow all of our food or to have a garden, if you can sign up as a CSA member, that's the #1 way that we're going to help younger people get a foothold in the state of Maine to be farming more. So in starting out, here's my recommendation. Start farming small, avoid debt. Don't get into debt until you're fairly stable and you know what you're doing, because otherwise it can grab you like a bear trap and drag you down. Again, I would focus on potatoes, or that's another Freudian slip. I'd focus on vegetables. I see a lot of people going with livestock, and I don't know many of them that are really making any money. And I try to sell as direct, as close to the consumer as you can. In the state of Maine, we're all small farmers. We've got to make our living on the margin because we don't have the scale to make it on volume. Volume seems to work. The guys in Aroostook County that are growing 1,500 acres, 2,000 acres, 2,500 acres, they're buying $500,000 potato harvesters every 4 years. They're complaining in the newspapers that we need to keep the Bush tax cuts for the highest 2% income, which tells me they're making at least $200,000 a year, or else they wouldn't be worried about it. On volume, there seems to be, in this dysfunctional economy, there seems to be money made, but those of us that are family scale, we've got to be working on the margin, and that means selling face-to-face direct to the consumer. Next, I would spend $100 and get a subscription to Uncle Henry's. You've got to get equipment because you've got to be efficient. If you start out with a 1/10 of an acre garden and you work your way up to 2-acre garden, and your basic model is a 1/10 of an acre garden on a 2-acre scale, you're going to burn yourself out. At some point, it's a rare farmer that doesn't have to get more mechanized and become more efficient. So the goal I'd set is to buy at least one piece of equipment a year, good equipment. And the criterion you use in establishing it is, will it make you more efficient? You know, don't go for the flashy New Holland blue tractor. Get a used tractor and then spend the savings on cultivators that can allow efficient weeding, and then get a planter so that you can plant in certain rows and you can cultivate that same row system. And those kind of details, if you need the details, come to the farmer-to-farmer conference. That's where the farmers that are doing this can share the knowledge that they've gained over the last 30 or 40 years. And you've got access. That's something that those of us that started up 30 years ago, we didn't have. We had to invent this by the skin of our teeth because we were inventing it ourselves. But you can benefit from that. You should be able to grow that much quicker. The other thing is buy a forklift. You can see them at Uncle Henry's for $1,500 or $2,000. Organic is heavy. We use rock powders. They come in 1-ton tote bags. You've got to be able to get them off the truck. A lot of people have a fork on a tractor, and that's good, and that's 1,000 pounds, but then you're going to be having 1,000-pound pallets instead of 2,000-pound pallets. You're going to be paying twice as much for trucking. So I think most organic people, this is going to sound crazy, but I think having a forklift, at the very least, have forks on a bucket tractor. You've got to do that because you've got to save your back. This is all hard stuff. And get pneumatic wheels so you can go off of asphalt. Final thing I'm going to say, Russell, is that it took Megan and me many years to develop our niche. We've got a mail order catalog right here. We've been doing this now for 20 years. We've been farming for almost 35 years. So for about 15 years, we tried growing strawberries and dry beans and beef and sheep and a CSA that we couldn't get enough subscribers to because we were ahead of our time. The bottom line is, don't get frustrated. You know, your niche is going to be out there. You just got to be open to it and finding it. So, organic farming, it's the best life there is, but don't confuse that with the easy life. It's a good life, but you got to like work. If you don't like work, you probably want to get into something else. But organic farming is great. MOFCA is great, and this Common Ground Fair is a wonderful demonstration of organic coming to age. Oh, and my final thing. These seed potatoes, as Russell reminded you, you can get yourself a free bag of seed potatoes, retail value $9.95, simply by becoming a member of the New England Farmers Union. $35, $10 worth of potatoes, really the equivalent, $25 out of your pocket. So the booth is over that way. I'll be there. We would like to give away these potatoes. We don't like bringing potatoes back to Aroostook County. We'd like to send them south.
Like every keynote speaker, they're great. They also could go pretty much all day. That's why we picked them. They know a lot. And Jim is here and would love to talk with you. And thank you so much for joining us. And Jim, thank you so much.
All of a sudden I looked at the clock and I go, oh, that was exciting.
Hi.